Good morning. A Sunday edition of the Coffee Topic. This is me just trying to stay awake during the normal working hours here in Europe. Did the gym, worked out, had some breakfast. I slept like a baby last night, by the way. Overslept a little bit, but I'm trying to get my clock to reset to this 6-hour shift. But I'm doing pretty good. I feel good. I feel energized. That might be the coffee talking. But I thought for this topic, I would talk about a topic that I cover in the upcoming book, not complete yet. I know I'm dragging my feet on it. The book overall covers, touches on the evolution of safety management, through history, and these management techniques and management approaches and how they've evolved. And I touch on this topic in one of the chapters, and that is workers' compensation. How does that have anything to do with safety management practices and approaches? Well, let me tell you. I'm going to read from, and again, so rough outline. This isn't how it may end up in the book, but I have a little blurb here that I'm going to read to you about this that might answer that question. But first, the reason why I'm talking about it today is, one, I am in Europe. While I'm not in Germany, Germany plays a big role in workers' compensation. So let's go ahead and get into this topic. I'm going to pull up my notes and go over them for you right now. All right. So the evolution of workers' compensation laws. According to the Congressional Research Service, there's a document titled Workers' Compensation Overview and Issues. The history of workers' compensation in the U.S. can be summarized as the evolution from a tort-based system where workers had to prove employer negligence in court to a no-fault system. The early 20th century saw the introduction of the grand bargain between employers and workers, where workers received guaranteed compensation for injuries and employers were shielded from lawsuits. But where did this come from? Inquiring minds want to know. Well, as industrial accidents became more frequent and the human toll more visible, governments began exploring workers' compensation. This system would provide injured workers with a no-fault compensation for medical expenses as well as lost wages. And this was important because I say countries, not just states. So this was worldwide, a big problem. This approach was a significant departure from earlier legal frameworks where workers had to prove negligence on the part of their employer to receive any kind of compensation. And this was a nearly impossible task in most cases for workers. The first significant workers' compensation law was introduced in, Germany. This was introduced in Germany under Otto von Bismarck in 1884. The German system was groundbreaking in shifting the burden of workplace injuries from workers to employers, who were required to pay into an insurance fund that would cover the cost of medical treatment as well as lost wages for workers. The success of the German model inspired other European countries to adopt similar systems. In this case, it was the United Kingdom and France. They implemented their workers' compensation laws by the early 20th century. Maryland, in the United States, Maryland passed the first limited workers' compensation law by 1902, but it was struck down. It wasn't comprehensive enough. So in 1911, the state of Wisconsin became the first to pass a comprehensive workers' compensation law in the U.S. This law guaranteed injured workers compensation for medical expenses and lost wages, regardless of who was at fault for the accident. Workers' compensation laws quickly spread nationwide, with most states enacting similar legislation by the 20s. By 1948, every state had a workers' compensation system in place. These laws were significant because they incentivized employers to improve workplace safety. By removing the threat of costly lawsuits, employers could focus on reducing the number of accidents through better safety practices. At the same time, workers were guaranteed some measure of financial security in the event of an injury. So what's important here is, and I've struggled with this myself, and I'm open to your interpretation as well. In fact, that's what I'm going to be asking you to do with the comments section. Is this notion that, wait a minute, we removed the threat of being sued for workplace injuries. How did that allow employers to focus on improving safety management systems? Don't you think that the threat of being sued would be the incentive? Well, not really, because it was very difficult for employees, workers who didn't have a lot of money, right? It was very hard for them to get a lawyer and to go to court and to try to prove that the employer was at fault. What do you think the employer usually relied on as a defense? Yeah, we have rules. Now, you and I, we can sit here and say, okay, well, the human and organizational performance or HOP approach is, blame fixes nothing. There are systemic issues. That is where we ended up, in my opinion, where we ended up. Now we have, instead of a court system, we have a workers' comp system. You all know, if you've managed workers' compensation, it's not called employers' compensation. It is called workers' compensation. And it is almost always going to go in favor of, the presumption is the worker was injured during the course of work and is entitled, which drives up, premiums, insurance premiums. So now we've shifted from this whole, well, all I got to do is mount a reasonable defense and blame the worker and I'm out. I don't have to pay anything, to, oh, it's almost always going to be some form of compensation, even if it's just the medical bills, Now it's a matter of, okay, the law is I have to pay into this system, and the payments are driven by my experience. So that shifts, and again, follow me on this. I'm not saying it's perfect. It's just the way I'm viewing it, and I want your thoughts on this. It definitely shifted the burden back onto the employer to say, all right, something happened in the workplace. The worker then goes to this insurance fund, and the insurance fund is set up because we presume that the injury happened in the workplace, that it's going to default to the worker and to compensate them for medical expenses and lost wages. And that in turn will drive the premiums that you have to pay. Employers then shifted from, no, he didn't follow a rule. That's not how they look at it, right? And that's how we got to these more modern approaches to managing safety, and especially the safety problems that we have. And workplace accident investigations have evolved. And spoiler alert, it is not a book about, workplace safety accident investigations, but there is a piece of that. It's more about how we approach managing safety in the workplace in general. And I feel this was a major shift, because if you think about it, lawsuits take time, they drag on, companies have money, they have, lawyers that are already on retainer, that are already being paid. And so it's not going to cost the company any more unless they get some outside counsel. But even then, a big company can do that, write that off as legal expenses. I don't know, any kind of scenario you can cook up to kind of shift that burden back to the worker that is an impossible task. I think once you kind of took that out of the equation, and then the law said, no, you have to pay these premiums, And then the premiums became the focus. Managing the premiums became the focus. Okay, what discount programs are there available? Do we do pre-employment drug testing, screening to kind of prevent, hiring a problem that would then generate a claim? Do you see how it starts to snowball? I didn't think of it that way a while back either. It's something I had to evolve into, this way of thinking of, wow, it was a novel concept, but it was really born out of, stopping these lawsuits, but also leveling the playing field for injured workers. And so I think it did, in fact, incentivize employers to focus efforts and resources on improving safety management and reducing workplace injuries and accidents. What do you think? Did the workers' compensation system help, hurt, or had no impact on the evolution of safety management over the years? I want to know what you think. I look forward to reading your replies.